So OnePlus has just launched the fresh new Nord 2 smartphone. It's a flagship killer in OnePlus's own words, boasting everything you need for just 399 quid. But only a couple of months ago, it also launched the Nord Core Edition 5G, which comes in at just 299 quid. And while the Core Edition does strip away some of the more premium elements found in the Nord 2, it will suit most people down to the ground, and 100 quid will buy you an awful lot of booze and pork scratchings. So which affordable mid-range mobile will be best for you, the fresh new Nord 2 or the Nord CE 5G? Well, let's do a full side-by-side comparison with them, testing out the camera tech, the gaming chops, the battery life, all that good stuff. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Now first up, stick the OnePlus Nord 2 next to its sibling, the Core Edition 5G. You'll really struggle to tell which is which. They're basically twins, right down to the selfie cam orifice wedged away in the corner. They're both 6.43-inch smartphones, so reasonably compact for 2021, especially thanks to the skinny bezels surrounding those displays, but they're still a bit of a handful. However, there is one hidden difference here at the front, and that is the fact you've got Gorilla Glass 5 covering and protecting the screen here on the OnePlus Nord 2, whereas in the Core Edition you do not get any Gorilla Glass protection, but you do get a pre-installed screen protector on both smartphones, so that definitely gets a thumbs up. So when you flip them around to the arse end, you'll definitely see a clear difference between the Nord 2 and the Nord Core Edition. So the back end of the OnePlus Nord 2, once again a Gorilla Glass, whereas it's just a bit of plastic action here on the OnePlus Nord CE 5G. The difference is quite obvious when you actually give them a bit of a fondle. And I have found that plastic back on the Core Edition does get a little bit scratched up if you leave it raw and unprotected, but thankfully you do get a condom case bundled in the box with both of these blowers, and you've got a selection of official cases you can slap on there if you want something a bit more jazzy. Certainly very jazzy in the case of the OnePlus Nord 2. Got a couple of colour options for these phones as well. The Nord 2 is available in grey or this rather stunning vibrant blue. The Nord Core Edition 5G, not much more thrilling. Black, blue or silver are your choices. And yeah, neither of these OnePlus blowers offers up an IP rating for water and dust resistance, but both of them are splash resistant. You can get them a little bit moist, no worries. There are a couple other design differences between the Nord 2 and the Nord CE 5G as well, well worth pointing out. The most obvious one being the lack of an alert slider on the Nord Core Edition. You'll only get that on the Nord 2. And this has been a staple of OnePlus smartphones for quite some time. It allows you to quickly flick between a full-on loud mode, vibrate and silent. Definitely very handy indeed. And another biggie is the fact that you've got a headphone jack on the Core Edition, but sadly that is stripped out for the more expensive Nord 2 model, which is a bit of a bum. And that's pretty much it for the design. The Nord 2 does come with a single volume rocker, whereas it is two separate buttons on the Core Edition. Somehow doubt that's going to be a deal breaker though. So now let's move on to the software, and understandably not much difference between these two OnePlus handsets. They're both running the latest, freshest Android 11, and on top of that you got OnePlus's own Oxygen OS launcher, though it is a slightly more up-to-date version at the moment on the OnePlus Nord 2. You got version 11.3 versus version 11.0.3 here on the Core Edition, but hopefully the CE 5G should catch up to the Nord 2 soon. Got a bit of parity action. Of course, the general UI experience is basically the same on both these smartphones anyway. They both support Android gestures, dark mode, all the usual stuff. You got the Google Discover feed. You can drag down that notifications bar from anywhere on screen. And one of the best things about Oxygen OS is the fact that it's fairly sort of stock. You'll know your way around it if you are used to Android, but you've also got more customization here. So for instance, you can bring in the OnePlus Shelf feature if you'd like a bit of that, just to track how many steps you haven't done in a given day. It can even remind you where you parked your car if you've addled your brain with far too much whiskey like I have. And if we actually jump into the settings menu on both these smartphones, you'll see you've got a personalization section on the OnePlus Nord 2, customization here on the OnePlus Nord CE 5G with its slightly older Oxygen OS, but basically does a very similar thing. You can quickly and easily change up your wallpapers, the icon packs that you use, the fonts, all of that good stuff. You can even change up the fingerprint animation here on the OnePlus Nord 2. There's some very psychedelic options indeed. And you've also got an ambient display option on both of these as well, which you can play around with, lots of different features on there. So basically, Oxygen OS is great, and no matter your choice, Nord 2 or Nord Core Edition 5G, you'll love it. And an even better news, no matter your choice of Nord smartphone, you're guaranteed 2 years of OS updates and 3 years of security updates, or set for the future. It's also worth pointing out as well, you've got a choice for either 128 or 256 gigs of storage space on both the OnePlus Nord 2 and the Core Edition 5G, depending on how much money you've spunk at OnePlus, basically. No micro SD support for either of these smartphones though, so you are stuck with whatever you choose. You can't expand it in the future. Let's check out the display tech, and the OnePlus Nord 2 and the OnePlus Nord CE 5G both sport a 6.43-inch AMOLED panel. So that means nice punchy in-your-face colors. It's actually completely customizable via the display settings as well. You can have more vivid hues if you like, that is the default setting. Otherwise you can scale it back down to the natural mode, more of an sRGB feel. It's Full HD plus resolution on both of these blowers as well, so nice crisp visuals, despite the fact you've got a fairly spacious panel. If you do go full screen, then you will of course have that slight selfie orifice intruding on the action, but only a tiny little bit, at least it's wedged away in the corner. And you do have HDR10 support on both the Nord 2 and the Nord CE 5G as well, so when you've got HDR content on the likes of Netflix or YouTube, nice sharp contrast and natural looking colours. You've got support for 90Hz refresh rate on both of them as well. It can actually dynamically scale from 60 to 90 based on what you're up to. Nice wide viewing angles and reasonably searing on the top brightness levels as well, so fine for outdoor use. So basically, no matter your choice of Nord smartphone, that display is going to make you all tingly in your trouserial department. Both the OnePlus Nord 2 and the Core Edition 5G of course sport the usual eye comfort modes, all of that good stuff as well. But you do actually get a couple of bonus modes here on the Nord 2 which aren't found, at least yet, on the Core Edition. They may come in a future update. These are the video image sharpener and the video color boost, which can just make crappy low-res SD video look a bit sharper and look a bit punchier. Now on the audio front, you've got a stereo speaker setup here on the OnePlus Nord 2. The bottom edge speaker is obviously a bit more punchy, bit louder than the earpiece speaker, but it still produces a fairly decent, respectable stereo output. Here on the OnePlus Nord Core Edition 5G, it is just that bottom mounted speaker, so it's just a mono setup. Let's test them side by side.
Curious plastic slab. It's 80 quid cheaper than the standard OnePlus Nord mid-range smartphone from last year, and as you would expect, that does mean some spec sacrifices such as a less refined camera and a less...
And now, the OnePlus Nord Core Edition.
Core Edition is a bit of a curious plastic slab. It's 80 quid cheaper than the standard OnePlus Nord mid-range smartphone from last year, and as you would expect, that does mean some spec sacrifice.
So side by side, in terms of the volume, definitely both are pretty much evenly matched, but the Core Edition 5G on that top volume, you can hear definitely some distortions, some tinniness creeping in there. Definitely not as clear and as crisp as the OnePlus Nord 2. But of course, the OnePlus Nord Core Edition 5G more than makes up for that with the fact that it's got a dedicated headphone jack, something that's missing on the Nord 2, so you'll have to rely on dongles, or of course good old Bluetooth. And I've had no bother whatsoever with the wireless audio streaming on both these OnePlus Nord smartphones. You've got support for all the usual codecs you'd expect, the likes of aptX, HD, and a good bit of LDAC action on both of them as well if you've got a pair of LDAC supported headphones like the Sony WHs. Alright, so let's chat performance. One of the major upgrades on the OnePlus Nord 2 compared with the Core Edition 5G is the fact that you've got the MediaTek Dimensity 1200 AI chipset packed into this bad boy. A fresh new custom chip from MediaTek just for the OnePlus Nord 2. The Nord Core Edition 5G is powered instead by Qualcomm's Snapdragon 750G platform. Still a very capable platform, but as you can see there from a quick squint at the Geekbench 5 scores, there is a difference in performance, both the single core and the multi-core. Now, I'm not going to do any of that side-by-side speed test bollocks, but I will tell you the Nord CE 5G, I used it as my full-time smartphone for a week. Absolutely no issues with the performance. Apps load up nice and quick and clean. They're not instantly shutting down in the background. I'm currently in the process of reviewing the OnePlus Nord 2, and again, as you would expect, very similar performance, nice and smooth and slick. The real difference you're going to notice is when you're gaming. If you are a gamer, then games like Call of Duty Mobile, PUBG, things like that, they'll run absolutely fine on the sort of top detail settings on both of these smartphones. Not an issue whatsoever. If you are into more hardcore stuff like Genshin Impact, the really resource draining, memory hogging, demanding titles that you can download from the Google Play Store, well, the OnePlus Nord 2 is definitely what you're going to want to go for. On the normal default settings, you'll get a perfectly smooth experience. You can even bump up to the highest detail settings, 60 frames per second, and you get a reasonably smooth, it's certainly perfectly playable still, although that's when the sort of stammers and judders start to creep in. And the phone does get a little bit toasty after sort of 20 or 30 minutes, but not to a troublesome degree, and it doesn't seem to throttle the performance either. Whereas here on the Nord Core Edition 5G, you can get away with playing Genshin Impact, but you want to bump down the detail settings a bit just to make it a more playable, enjoyable experience, and once again does tend to heat up a bit. And yeah, you do have a dedicated gaming mode on both of these smartphones as well, courtesy of that Oxygen OS launcher. It's basically just drag it out from either corner. You've got access to notifications, blockers. You've got the Pro Gaming mode, which can basically completely wipe out any kind of distraction, keep you fully focused on the game. So let's schmove our way onto the battery tech. And the OnePlus Nord 2 and the OnePlus Nord Core Edition 5G both sport a 4,500 mAh capacity cell. It's actually a dual design battery here on the OnePlus Nord 2 though, so that means it supports Warp Charge 65, which means that it will charge up from completely drained to 100% full ready for action in just 30 minutes. Because the Core Edition isn't a slouch, it still supports OnePlus's Warp Charge 30T Plus tech, but it will take closer to an hour to charge up rather than half an hour. But I've had no real issues with the battery life either. Plenty of screen on time. You should still make it through a full day no matter which phone you decide to go with. And both phones also support adaptive charging as well, so you can leave them plugged in all night long, and it shouldn't overcharge the battery. It will trickle charge up to 100% just before you spring out of bed ready for action in the morning. But if you're expecting a bit of wireless charging on either of these handsets, well, you're going to be a bit disappointed. That's still quite a rare feature at this sort of asking price. Now you get a triple lens rear camera setup on both of these Nord smartphones, but it is different hardware. You've got a 50 megapixel IMX766 primary sensor on the Nord 2 with a bit of built-in optical image stabilization. In the case of the Nord CE 5G, it's more basic 64 megapixel primary sensor without OIS. May boast more megapixels, but as we all know, bigger numbers doesn't equal better photos. Now one thing you'll possibly notice pretty much immediately upon loading up the camera apps is they are different here on the OnePlus Nord 2 versus the Core Edition 5G. The Core Edition uses the more traditional Oxygen OS camera UI, whereas here on the OnePlus Nord 2 it's more akin to the likes of the Oppo camera app. Presumably because of the fact that OnePlus and Oppo are now collaborating much more closely than they used to. You may find you personally prefer one over the other. For instance, in the case of the traditional OnePlus Oxygen OS app, you do have fast access to all of the different camera features just by flicking your finger up. Whereas here, in the case of the OnePlus Nord 2, you do have to flick across to more to get access to the likes of the Pro mode. There's no real biggie, they basically do still have the same feature set. Now the Nord 2 is definitely capable of capturing lifelike natural images, though with more vibrant subjects like plant life, I did find it occasionally went a bit nuts with those colours, even with the AI mode switched off, while the Nord CE 5G very dependent on the lighting conditions. Speaking of which, the Nord 2 actually seems to struggle just a little bit more than the CE in brighter light, with more obvious oversaturation creeping into photos. However, this does always seem to be the case with OnePlus smartphones. When they are first launched, the cameras do seem to oversaturate a bit more than expected, and then a couple of updates down the line, generally the results are a bit better. And so hopefully give it a couple of months and some of that oversaturation, some of the blowouts in the brighter conditions will just not be a problem anymore. Indoors and in softer light, the Nord 2 is definitely the winner, capturing stronger details and more realistic hues. And when things get seriously dark or the contrast is very high, the Nord 2 is again the best here, even on auto mode, while the Core Edition 5G sometimes struggles to focus. And both phones spot a night mode to help brighten up a shot, but again this often produces blurry results on the Core Edition 5G. And both the Nord 2 and the Core Edition 5G rock an 8 megapixel ultra-wide angle shooter. This produces better results on the Nord 2. It's closer to what you'll see with the naked eye, but you do get distortion on both. And that triple lens setup on both the Core Edition and the Nord 2 is rounded off with a simple 2 megapixel mono shooter just for your black and white shots, if that's your bag. As for video, well, you can shoot full HD at 30 or 60 frames per second or bump up to 4K resolution at 30 frames per second on either Nord handset, and you'll get very respectable results. You've got good image stabilization thrown in there and strong audio pickup too. And last up, there's a 32 megapixel selfie cam on the OnePlus Nord 2 versus a 16 meg effort on the Nord Core Edition, and selfies can look quite flat on that CE 5G, while the Nord 2 captures accurate skin tones. But the Nord 2 also struggles in strong light again, while the Core Edition usually produces the best portrait results. And that right there in a nutshell is the fresh new OnePlus Nord 2 versus the OnePlus Nord Core Edition 5G. Now, I've fully unboxed the OnePlus Nord 2. My full in-depth review will be coming hopefully shortly after this video lands as well, once I've spent a bit more time with my SIM slapped inside it, just testing it out. It's my full-time everyday personal handset. The OnePlus Nord Core Edition 5G unboxing and full review are live right now, so go check that out for more you need to know on this 299 quid blow. Definitely solid value for money. So it'd be great to hear your own thoughts down in the comments below, which one you're more tempted by. Certainly the Nord 2 is one for the more demanding users, probably, with that beefier performance, the faster charge and battery, all that good stuff. But the Core Edition 5G, solid value for money, will suit most users down to the ground. And of course, you've got the bonus of the likes of the headphone jack and stuff, which you don't actually get on the OnePlus Nord 2. So yeah, solid value for money for 299 quid. But as I say, that's what I think. Let me know your own thoughts down below. Please do poke, subscribe, and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech. And have yourselves a fan-bloody-tastic rest of the week. Cheers, everyone. Love you.